Fun and free automotive advice with real-world solutions to everyday automotive problems. The Under the Hood Show is heard weekly on this and other great radio stations across the U.S. Find out how you can participate in the show by visiting underthehoodshow.com.
With Russ Evans, this is Shannon Nordstrom, thanking you for tuning in to the Nordstrom's Under the Hood Show. Have a great day, and remember, PTLA.
The opinions heard on this program, based on the many years of experience of Russ and Shannon, are offered for entertainment value only and as a guide to your repair needs. No claim to repair or cause is given or implied. Always consult with your own certified technician and follow all safety procedures before attempting any repair. To be a part of the show, call 866-594-4150. Under the Hood is produced by Prairie House Productions. All content is the property of Nordstrom's Automotive Incorporated and may not be used without our permission. Copyright Nordstrom's Automotive, Inc. Now, let's go under the hood with the Nordstrom's Motor Medics.
Welcome to the Under the Hood Show. Glad to have you with us. 866-594-4150. From the Autotempest.com studios, all the cars, one search. This is the Under the Hood Show. Russ Evans is here to answer your automotive questions.
Welcome to Under the Hood. Thanks for joining us.
Shannon Nordstrom is here to do the same.
Welcome, Hoodies. Thanks for tuning in so we can help you tune up.
I'm Chris Carter, here to take your calls at 866-594-4150. What has caught your attention in the automotive world? I think I know.
You do?
Gas prices.
Gas prices.
Yeah.
More shortages on cars. Cars are, there's a lot of production being shut down right now. There's parts. If you need parts for your BMW, good luck, because a lot of they've got parts plants in Ukraine.
Oh, that's sad.
Yeah. So, but with the parts shortages, there's going to be more parts. So, what does that mean? That means used cars. It's been a year now. We've been telling people, well, eventually there'll be enough new cars on the market to get those older ones out into the used market, and then we'll see what happens. But now we're still at square one. We have not really had enough new cars to get old to go into the used car market. So the used cars are still continuing at our shop, at least, to get older and older, and people repairing stuff that's been parked for a while. We've had a few cars and trucks lately that have been sitting for 3 or 4 years because they said, well, I'm not really ready to get rid of it because it's a nice vehicle, but
right.
I can't get anything for it, but it's really not worth spending several $1,000s to put an engine in it and get it going if it's an expensive one. And they're doing it now because, you say to somebody, Chris, let's just take your Solstice, for example. If you're going to drive it every day.
Chris says, would you stop using my Solstice as an example?
Sick of examples.
If your engine were to fail, you've got a car that's probably worth, in today's scrap market prices, that one's probably worth $1,500, maybe something like that, Shannon.
Give or take.
With a bad engine.
You're not too far off.
Because it's a hot car,
Yeah.
There you go, Chris. It's a hot car.
Thanks.
Well,
buddy.
it's just been probably a little bit less because it's not as in-demand parts.
There you go. Maybe a little less. So $1,000 to $1,500. Yeah. So,
if the motor was blown up.
Yeah. So if you were to go
keep that in mind, Chris.
If you were to go buy it though, as is now, maybe $12,000. So,
I'm open to offers.
But you got to buy another one. So if I tell you you're going to have to spend $6,000 to put an engine there, go, I only paid this much. Why would I spend that? So there's your $6,000. Could you go buy a good running car like yours for $6,000? No, that's still half price. So people are saying, well, that makes sense. Let's fix this thing up and get it going. Now I've got a car that I own. I'm not making payments on, and that's the way to do it. There's just right now the used car market is hot. Now there's stuff out there to buy. If you go to our partners at Autotempest.com, you will see cars for sale. And if you're starting a search, that is a great place to start a search. And they're not all crazy money, but generally all across the board, everything is.
That's where you're going to find your value because you're going to have a wide spectrum of comparison.
And the bigger place you have with a platinum platform like Autotempest.com, you've got a big area with all the cars in one search. You can see everything and get a better value than if you just pick up your local paper and try to find one car in one market. But it's getting tough. People are calling us every few days. where can I get a car? Do you know anything that's for sale? Hey, I saw a car on your lot. Is that for sale? No, that's a customer car. They're
Right.
fixing it. And they'll say things like, well, it's an old one, so I thought maybe you were selling it. If it has a for sale sign on it, it's for sale, but we don't have any of those. It just happens to be that people are bringing these older cars out. And it's kind of neat because we are seeing stuff that's from the late 90s, early 2000s, that's in pretty good shape that we thought was a lost cause. People weren't going to fix it. Now we're getting some pretty nice examples of older stuff, and it's kind of refreshing to see them around the shop. At this point now, I bet there's a lot of people wishing cash for clunkers had never happened because there would be a lot of cars out in the market right now that would be really cool cars that would be running again. I just watched I was thinking, Chris, you compare times a lot, with where we are now, and it was only this many years. I was watching an episode of Home Improvement a few days ago. Tim Allen and Richard Karn and the guys, and they were at a junkyard. They said, we're making a trip, and he found his first car, an old Corvair. Well, this was a show that was filmed in 1994, and they were showing cars in this yard from the early 70s, like 70, 71, 72. Well, now, if we skip forward, we'd be showing cars from cars from 2002 are older than what was
Right.
the gap there. So it's kind of neat. If we were to do that episode again, we'd be showing cars like from 2003 or 2004.
What jumped out at you that you saw in the background that was interesting?
Oh, they had, so where are all these cars? They had Nash Metropolitans.
Oh, really?
They had a whole wall of Nash Metropolitans, and they had a Torino in there. They had a bunch of Ford Falcons in there, just things that were super common, like in 1990.
Weird.
They're just gone now. There's a few cars you don't see anymore. Vista Cruiser. When was the last time you saw a Vista Cruiser at a car show or on the road or anything? The big old wagon with the glass roof in it. That's what they used in that 70s show. You just don't see those cars anymore, and it's sad. I miss them because they were my thing. But younger people, my daughter, my grandkids, they'd be going, well, yeah, look at that 2010, whatever is cool. They don't think about the older stuff.
866-594-4150. Let's talk to Steve. You're on the Under the Hood Show. Steve, what can we do for you?
Yeah, I've got a 2013 Buick Enclave. I'm looking at to buy, and the only thing that's really scaring me that's got 120,000 miles on it. Guys, you scared of buying something like that? How many miles?
Well, if it's a 2013 Enclave and you're looking at it, I would want to do a vehicle history report on it, and hopefully that vehicle's had its maintenance. When you get into that vehicle history report, the most common brand name one is Carfax. And as you get into that report, and like Russ at his shop, a lot of the Mitchell managed shops, that's the name of the company that makes a management system for repair shops. They've got a version of this. They can look at the repair side of it with part of their subscription that they have.
Right.
But you want to be able to see that this maintenance has been done. Now, just because you don't see it on that report doesn't mean it hasn't been done. But if you see there's a regular pattern of maintenance that has been done at a shop that has that connection, you're going to be able to see what's been done. And I'd love to see that that's had timing chains put in it at some point in its life in the last 40,000 miles.
That would excite me, buying a car with that many miles that had that done.
Because that engine will run up to 300,000 miles with timing chains in it. But they don't sometimes make it to 120,000 miles without having timing chains put in them. And so I know that when we go through and inventory our vehicles that we're going to take recycled original equipment motors out of, we're training our inventory staff to look for the check engine lights, what codes it has. There's certain codes that come into play when they're having problems with that chain getting loose. And a combination of things cause that. We've seen vehicles that are well-maintained not have any of these problems. Well-maintained, using the proper fluids, not have these problems, because if you use the right oils, it'll cling to the chain better. It will have less fly-off resistance. It's going to lubricate those parts a lot better. And as the oil changes get longer and broken down, you lose some of that protection. And timing chain guide wear becomes a thing. And so I kind of jump on that soapbox, but that is the most common thing on that vehicle. The transmissions were intermittently a problem, no different than I would say about anything when you're in that era. There were some of the older ones that a lot of them had problems, but in that era, not as many. But the bigger thing that I'd be wanting to look at is, has it had that work done to it? Because it's probably going to need it at some point. So you'd want to budget how much money approximately, Russ, to do chains in one of them nowadays, give or take.
$2,800. You
'Cause
got to pull the engine to
You
do
got to
it.
drop the engine down, take the front cover off, and then they buy a kit to replace all
Parts
that.
have really gone up.
And so that's probably the area we'd be the most concerned with. And then, of course, just a good physical inspection. Make sure the vehicle looks clean. Make sure the body is solid. Somebody puts it up on a hoist and there's not been previous repairs that have been done poorly that can be recognized in the unibody. That's the kind of stuff you're going to look for. But they're good vehicles once you get past that one challenge that seems to pop up the most.
And the previous repairs thing can be fine as long as they were done right.
Exactly.
I mean, it can be better than an original.
Exactly. Does that kind of help what you were looking for?
Yes, I mean, by the looks of it, you would never guess it would have that many miles on it. Clean, inside clean, outside clean. I mean, it looks very nice.
Yeah, no, that is a big deal. I mean, if it has the look and shine, that's a big deal. I mean, today's vehicles, I'm careful saying this, but the paints last longer. The
Way
interiors
longer,
hold
yeah.
together longer. The fit and finish is better. And I say today's vehicle, you're talking about a vehicle there that's already 9 years old, but they just are better. So a vehicle of that age can get cleaned up and look really nice. So I like that, but you can still get one looking pretty good, even if it maybe wasn't a year ago,
You can detail your way.
to make it look pretty
Right.
impressive. So you still want to really check on that vehicle history report and then having an inspection done that you can get your hands on for the vehicle. And if they don't have one that they've done themselves with some sort of a guarantee when they're selling it, ask if you can have it inspected yourself, because that's a big investment.
Steve, thanks very much for the call. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we want to hear from you. 866-594-4150. You're listening to the Under the Hood Show.
Be sure to visit our website for news, contests, and previous shows at underthehoodshow.com. Welcome back, everybody. It's time to get back under the hood with the Motor Medics.
866-594-4150. From the Autotempest.com studios, all the cars, one search. This is the Under the Hood Show. What else has caught your attention? With all of the supply chain issues and all of the things that are going on, we're seeing more things in the world that could upset that supply chain.
Let's talk about something more fun, okay?
All right.
You were just telling us during the break about something that you're excited about that's automotive related. Let's chat about that a little bit. There's enough things that we all got that are heavy on our minds. This world is a tough place right now.
Seeing a lot of new Broncos running around
Have you?
on the street. Yeah, I've probably seen 7 or 8 of them.
Not mine.
Not yours.
How much the Bronco Sport? How much bigger is the Bronco than the Bronco Sport? Because
Well, that's what got me is because when I've seen these, I went, oh, that's a small. No, that's and I'm hard to say bigger Bronco.
You know what? I'm going to say it this way. In my opinion, the way
They're a
they're
little
optioned
bigger.
can make a big difference.
Okay.
If it
The
just
flares and without. make
Yeah,
them
when you
look
get the
completely
Bronco
different.
full size, that is probably one of the first models, and they don't have the big Sasquatch package with the bigger tires and wheels and flares and things like that. They do have similarities to the Bronco Sport.
Okay.
Size-wise, there is a pretty big difference because the full-size Bronco is a body on frame. The Bronco Sport is a unitized structure, kind of like I'd say in comparison to a Jeep Grand Cherokee. Well, that's not even a good comparison.
When I
'cause
see them
that's-
drive by, they look about the size of a Wrangler.
yeah,
a little bigger, maybe.
They're real similar.
Maybe a wider, but the same
yeah,
length.
they're real similar.
They remind me of was it the Liberty? Was going to be your what was your Jeep comparison going to be? The small
Well,
one.
I can't do it. I was gonna go. Wrangler really doesn't compare to anything else in the line, but Grand Cherokee versus the small Cherokee or the
Okay.
Compass and some of
Yeah.
those types of vehicles.
I saw one the other day that made me think of the small Jeeps.
Yeah, like
not
a
Wrangler.
Liberty
Yeah.
and the small Bronco, they look very similar.
Yeah. So anyway, though,
Size-wise.
that's good. You've been seeing some out in the wild. There's
Maybe you'll get
definitely
one.
more around. But well, tell us about what you're looking forward to. You said you were talking about this being upcoming, and this is a. He said you heard about the new Formula One. I'm like, is there a new series? And then he's like, no. And then I remember you mentioned
Yeah.
this before.
The Netflix series Drive to Survive, the F1 series. It's the greatest show. It's the greatest show on TV. I love it. we got hooked on it last season. There was an article in Road and Track about it and how much it has changed the popularity of F1 in the United States. And so I watched the first episode. I think I had watched the very first episode a couple years ago. And it just I don't know anything about F1, so it just didn't hold my interest that much as a reality show.
Well,
or
you
as
didn't, but now.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I watched the first episode of season 3, and in a week we watched every episode of season 3. And so I was looking forward to season 4 coming out, and it came out last Friday. And I've only through spring break circumstances haven't been able to watch more than one, but it's just a fantastic show, and it explains some of the racing. It definitely explains the racing of F1, but it does a much better job of explaining the F1 series itself and the politics and the money.
It's huge money.
Oh my gosh. The crew of, I think it was the Mercedes team, has 1,100 people on their F1 team.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And
so they make their budget makes the NASCAR budget look like sack lunch.
Yes. Yeah, the one team, I think I'm remembering the
I mean, that's a
numbers
little
correctly.
harsh, but I mean it's
Well,
a huge money difference.
The small team, the team that was the teams that are struggling, and just their budget for the year is like $400 million. And they're the team that they can't compete. And everybody knows that. It's fine. They're going to try and finish around 10th place or 15th place. That's what their goal is. And it is just
enough to get the sponsor name seen once or twice.
Oh my gosh. And if I don't have the numbers right, it's just because I don't know. But man, is it just a fantastic show. And the thing I like about it, and the thing that the article I read, the F1 people don't like about it, is they kind of create drama, but it's not like reality show drama that gets created. It is, they'll take these two drivers that have this battle going, whether they're on the same team or opposite teams, and then that episode will kind of be about those two drivers and the entire season. It'll just kind of jump forward to what the dramatic parts of, if somebody ran somebody off the road in week 4, they'll show that, and then they'll show what happened in week 8. And then in the next episode, they're focusing on someone else. So in the background of it, you'll see the two guys that crashed in the episode before, but it's just background and how it affects the driver that you're kind of focused on. It's just, man, it's just so exciting. And I don't think I've ever watched an F1 race in my life. And now I can't wait until the F1 series starts, season starts, because I'm ready now. I know it. But it is. It did take some Googling for me to be able to find out what they were even talking about, because the language, not literally the language is foreign, but the stuff they talk about in F1 is just not anything they use terminology in the zones they use is just, I didn't know anything about it, but I was able to follow along and then look it up. It was just great.
I've never seen it, never watched it. The voices that narrate, are they classic Chris Kanamaki or whatever his name was, or is it what do they got going on for the voices? Is it British? Is it
I think I'm not sure because I've never watched F1, but I think they have, my hunch is that they have someone recreating the calls while they're doing it. I think the person calling the race, they do share some voices from the races.
Translate them.
But I think mostly they've got someone else who does the recreation of the calls, like when Lewis Hamilton goes around the outside. I think that's I don't think that's race audio. I think their guy. They have kind of a main
curious.
guy. Yeah,
I'm kind of getting a feel in my head, and I was just kind of curious.
Like excited PGA Tour announcers.
Yeah, it is a
They
bit.
had too much coffee.
It is too often, or the reason I think that is because the announcer always addresses the situation you're watching. Even if they're the 7th place car, that main announcer always happens to mention what happened with the two guys you're following. So I think that's just a recreation, but they do it really, really well. So it is just, I'm super excited to take a look at an actual race. And my brother's a big fan. He's like, let's go to Austin. Let's go watch one. Come on, let's go. And I'm okay. All right, we got to take a quick break. When we come back, we want to hear from you. 866-594-4150. You're listening to the Under the Hood Show.
Participate in the show by visiting underthehoodshow.com.
866-594-4150. From the Autotempest.com studios, all the cars, one search. This is the Under the Hood Show. Aaron's been waiting a while. Let's see if we can get him on the air. Aaron, you're on the Under the Hood Show. What can we do for you?
Hi. I have a 1993 Chevy Caprice. It was an old police car. It's got a 350 throttle body, and the injectors will cut out. One of the injectors will cut out every once in a while, and it'll run on one injector. It'll run really rough, and then it'll kick back in again, and I can't seem to figure it out.
Well, those injectors are paired together. There is a pink wire running up to them that powers them. They're both powered together from the ignition. There's two fuses in that powers it. So on the side, what we start with is the computer fires them. So we're going to put a voltmeter on the injectors, one on each side, maybe a 2-channel meter, or find the one, if you know which side dies, then hook up to that side and just back probe it and then watch it. If it starts running bad, watch and see if you've dropped out power. If you haven't dropped out any power there, then it's got to be in the other side that goes back to the computer. You can go right to the computer itself and put a Noid light on there from 12 volts on one side to that computer and watch it blinking. And if it stops blinking and you're right at the computer itself, then you know the computer's the problem. So it's a pretty simple diagnosis. If you don't have anything coming out of the computer, since they're fired in pairs together, then the computer's bad. If you do have a fire coming out of that computer, it's grounding that white side of the injector, then you've got to have a power issue, or you've got just an injector that is shorted internally, so it's got too much resistance and it's shutting down that side.
Could he try switching the injectors and see if the problem moves?
Yeah, I switched the injectors and it stays on the same side.
You switch the
so
wires?
Both injectors work.
Yeah, did you switch the wires or the injector?
The wires.
Okay, yeah, so if you take it, so is it just the left side or right side? One side's out, right?
Yeah, one side is out. When I switched the wires, the opposite side works. So both injectors work. It's the side, the left side. If I put it on the right, it's the right side that
okay, good.
Doesn't work. And
that tells us the injectors are fine then, and that it's got to either be an open in the wiring so you're not getting power to that side all the time, or an open in the wiring where you're not getting the ground to the other side that goes all the way back to the computer, or the computer itself has failed. On that car, we've seen a number of computer issues, and they're very hard to get. That engine, when we were doing our factory performance thing, and that was 15 years ago, we had a lot of problems with them, and they were extremely hard to find a computer at that time. I don't know if they've ever come back to building any remanufactured. I don't think they have.
Well, you'd definitely be looking for our partner, Cardash Part, and searching for an engine computer if that is where you end up at.
Yeah, it's going to be really the only way to get one. And then they've got a chip in them so you can swap them out.
Because that's the style that was used from 90 to 94 or 3, somewhere in there. 4, I think it's the same as the pickups.
Yeah.
And lots of them.
And 95 even, I think. And 96 is when they went to the LT, if I remember right. So, but that sounds like you've got some good ideas going. You guys got to go a little bit further with it. So,
Aaron, thanks very much for the call. 866-594-4150. If you like our Facebook page and follow us on Facebook, join the Under the Hood Show fan club at underthehoodshow.com. You could win a hoodie.
Like one of these 5 people.
Oh.
5?
Oh.
Jack Brennan from Memphis, Missouri. Congratulations from all of us here under the hood and our friends over at Universal Technical Institute, uti.edu. But also, thanks to our partners at Berkeley One Classics, Ralph Luden, Luke Cheddar, Harry Kudera, and Daniel Sangster, that'd be Spider-Man Dan, have all won hoodies from the recent online event that Berkeley One Classics put on. We said there'd be 4 hoodies going out, and sure enough, they've already gone out.
Give me those names again. I'm trying to jot them down over here.
Ralph Luden,
Right. Got to make sure they hear them. So,
Luke Cheddar.
all right.
That's
all
a
right.
TSCH.
Sure.
Julie H is another one that hasn't. I've been trying to contact, so that'd be 5. Terry Kudera and Daniel Sangster.
Okay.
It's from all over the country, different places: Minnesota, Nebraska, Tennessee, South Dakota.
Okay.
All right.
Kinda
That's
all over.
awesome.
So congratulations on our friends over at Universal Technical Institute. This is the time of year where they get a lot of interest. People coming in,
Sure.
getting ready to start the next session. You know, they want to get in there and learn about cars, and now is the time to do it. There's a lot of changes, even though we're not seeing as many new cars out in the market. There are a lot of changes. The technology is still being introduced, so you may be a person that come 3-4 years down the road when these vehicles come out. You may think you know it all, but you may not know it all because there's new technology, even though there's not that many cars. But eventually they will arrive, and you better be trained.
I wondered that when we talked about the supply chain. If we don't see that many 2022s or 2023s, in 2024, there's still going to be
A change.
a 24.
Right. There's going to be a change in the vehicles, and a lot of so much is changing right now with the emission systems and the way these engines are running to get better fuel economy. You owe it to yourself if you're a technician to learn about it.
866-594-4150. Let's talk to Derek. You're on the Under the Hood Show. Derek, what can we do for you?
Hey guys, I've been listening for a while now. Last week, we got a caller trying to get best fuel economy that could.
Right.
And then at the end of the segment, you guys basically said that there's no way to get better fuel economy than what the manufacturer states. Your plugs clean, tires inflated, whatever.
On that particular
just-
vehicle, yeah.
What are you thinking? You've got something to add, apparently.
There's different vehicles. There are a few things you can do, but on that particular one, yeah, you're not getting anything better out of it.
Yeah. What kind of vehicle are you thinking about? What have you learned?
I guess I've just read a lot and seen a lot where have you guys ever heard of the guy named Thomas Ogle? You know anything about that story?
Not that I can think of. There's a lot of them out there, though, people that have tried to do different things with fuel mileage, and there's a lot of stuff that's scams. You got to be careful of those too.
Yeah, and there's a lot of brilliant people out there that have done some pretty unique things that were hard to scale, but were able to accomplish some things. What's this story about? I'm serious. You're digging into something. I want to hear what you're thinking, what you saw, what you read.
So Thomas Ogle was basically just a car mechanic back in the 1970s, down in New Mexico, I believe, in El Paso.
See the carburetor
Anyway, he's the carburetor guy.
guy? Okay,
I
keep
mean,
telling this because
a lot of people have heard about it.
Tell them.
Where he basically made, what was it? I think it was like a Studebaker run 100 miles to the gallon.
I do remember.
It's a very credible story. It sounds like, and I mean, just so through what I have gathered, like I really can't imagine that it doesn't work. I just don't have time to try it myself.
Yeah, there was a lot of people tried to recreate that, and I do remember I was living in Texas back in the early '80s and hearing about this, so it wasn't that much after this was supposedly had happened. Now it's a long time after, but they talked about that. They even made a XFiles episode about it. Producer Doug might remember that, where they found the Studebaker in the shed that had the carburetor that the government killed the guy and took the car. You remember the 100 mile a gallon. Yep. So and there's been quite a few Men in Black kind of stories made about that, but I I can see, as the conspiracy theory person in me would say, yeah, I could see why would an oil company want a car that got that kind of miles per gallon? But a lot of people have tried to recreate that exact thing. I don't know if they've been able to do it or not, because maybe they've disappeared. We're not working on those projects
Right.
here.
Yeah, no,
we're not doing it.
This was all Derek's idea.
Chris's car does
Yeah.
not get 200 miles to the gallon.
No,
it does not.
Sure doesn't.
But as far as our normal listeners and their normal cars, there's tuners that you can put on certain vehicles that can optimize for fuel economy,
Yeah,
and you can
especially in a
sometimes,
diesel.
and you can sometimes pick up a mile per gallon or so, or 2 or 3. The way you drive is what we've talked about being the biggest thing. It is a contributing factor. Of course, like you said, you heard it: the air pressure in the tires, the state of tune of the engine, making sure everything's efficiently running and working. But when you put it into perspective, a modern vehicle now with a direct fuel injector at a high pressure, atomizing directly into the cylinder. In each cylinder controlled finitely by spark and fuel, compared to an old carburetor that they used to dump downdraft carburetor, into a basically flowing this air fuel mixture into a multi-vaned intake manifold and eventually going through the valves and getting to the cylinder. It's just hard to believe when you hear those things, but there's a lot of people that really hung by those stories. That they would work. And like Russ said, people have tried to recreate, and there is a lot of that out there. But it's definitely it's good reading, and it's something that if they could create it, I heard about the Borax soap guy, that the government came and took the car. I've heard that story a number of times and read about it. A lot of different things out there, but at the end of the day, we kind of work with the fleet that we have, and that's what we have to talk about.
Derek, thanks very much for the call. I'm totally gonna dig it. I'm totally going down the rabbit hole on this.
Are ya?
one. Yeah, I think so.
You're going to be reading about it?
You know why? Because gas is $4 again.
Yep.
Yeah, that's why.
A year ago, I would have been like, it's fine. Derek, thanks very much for the call. 866-594-4150. Let's talk to DG in Oregon. DG, you're on the Under the Hood show. What can we do for you?
Hey guys, great show.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
I've got a 94 E350 on-line van with 460 in it, and I've got a exhaust manifold leak. And the shops around here are so busy, they don't want to do it. And I was wondering, is there anything you can do
They don't want to do it.
repair that leak?
No, but they
Other
don't.
than, those 460s are bad on those
Oh, yeah.
exhaust leaks.
That thing, that's one of the horriblest, the most horrible, dirty job you could. No, we don't want to do it. We wouldn't do it. Most shops are thinking, I'm not busy. I just don't want to do it. Yeah, that's a lot of work. We had a tow truck, this 88 Ford, and we put manifolds on it 3 times. It's like, that thing's getting noisy. We should put some manifolds on it. It looks horrible. Well, yeah, it does, but I don't want to do them anymore. Let's crush that thing. They're just tough. Most of the bolts bust off in the head. You got to drill them out or weld to them and try to extract them. Oh, it's just, and in that van, it's even worse because you've got no room around it to work to get them out. So there is no fix other than removing the manifolds. And in that van, depending on which bolts break off, so a shop should be telling you, so all right, we're going to work on your van. It's going to cost, let's say, $900 per side to do this. If it's with all parts included, if the bolts come out. If the bolts don't come out, it's going to cost you, let's say, up to $130, $150 per bolt to extract them if they're in an area where we can get through the wheel well to get to them. If they're not, in the worst case, we'll have to pull your engine, and let's just throw out a number. It's going to be $4,000 to pull it out, drill all those out, and while we're at it, we'll reseal all your oil. I mean, just something like that they're going to throw at you. They should be telling you up front what the possibilities are in the worst case, because you sure don't want to go in there saying, oh, $1,800, let's get it fixed. Mm-hmm. And then they call you and say, yeah, well, we can't get the bolts out. It's not drivable anymore. The engine's got to come out to fix it, or the heads have to come off. What do you want to do? Now you don't have a van anymore. So while you just have a leak, now's the time to ask those questions.
Well, DG, I think, was getting to the question, too. I'm going to guess this was the question. Is there anything else you can do? Was that what you were getting at?
Right. I was wondering, could they weld that set?
That'd be great if you could weld the manifold right to the head, but you can't. There's no
Well, unless,
fix.
like I said, Russ has hit it right on the head because these things are a pain. Is this like also in a motorhome? That would make it worse because then you can't get it in the shop very easy. Or is it just a straight van?
No, well, it's a high top.
Oh,
Yeah. So
But they can get it stop on.
okay, all right.
I
But
took
you can
one
see
stop.
on yours, you can see a physical crack on the manifold.
No, there's no crack, but I can hear it. But when you step on an accelerator,
Yeah.
and I
'cause-
can see there's black exhaust that comes out onto the manifold there. It's in the rear cylinder on the passenger side.
Yeah, it's a tough one because the leak is coming out between the head and the manifold, and so it's warped more than likely, and sometimes you even have to plane the heads to get the heads flat. But at a minimum, you got to plane the manifold if the manifold is still usable, or else you buy a replacement manifold. There's plenty available.
we buy the Dorman manifolds and replace both of them because the old ones do get brittle, and you're just running the risk of putting the new ones or putting some plain ones on and they crack.
And it's 30 years old.
Yeah.
So,
It's a tough deal. I wish we had a better solution for you, but it's just a tough deal.
DG, sorry about that. I hope it's not van life. This isn't like at the beginning of the van life blog that you were planning, the Instagram, We're going to take a break. When we come back, we want to hear from you. 866-594-4150. You're listening to the Under the Hood Show.
Make a radio appointment each week to hear the Nordstrom's Under the Hood Show.
866-594-4150 from the Autotempest.com studios. All the cars, one search. This is the Under the Hood Show. Let's talk to Doug. You're on the Under the Hood Show. Doug, what can we do for you?
Well, good morning, fellas. Really enjoy the show for a number of years, but I got a question that follows along with what that Derek had. Except I'm going to ask you, Russ, what's your opinion of these hydrogen generators that are all over the internet? Gone or
Fail.
something of some
Yeah.
validity?
Definitely a scam. I've got a cousin that works for a company that they've investigated those kind of things. NASA actually did a test. They wanted to see how much hydrogen was needed to change fuel mileage in a car, and they did this the last time fuel was up, and it was like 8 or 9 years ago. Chris, you remember us talking about that?
Mm-hmm.
Car and Driver, Popular Mechanics, I think it was, showed that test, and the amount of hydrogen needed to make a 1 mile per gallon difference in a car that was measured under test conditions was more hydrogen than about 30 of those kits could produce. They look pretty cool. If they could actually work, they would be a pretty cool thing, but they just don't make a difference. We had a few of those cars. Remember, Shannon, when the prices were so high on fuel and people were testing those, and Scott was showing us the kits that people had, and a couple
This
people
is all coming back to me as you talk about it, yes.
people had put them under their hoods and had explosions, and they called and said, "Hey, Nordstrom's, I need a hood. Why do you need a hood?" I don't want to say.
Yeah,
Or they had
their
these-
experiment went bad.
They will generate enough hydrogen to create a little bomb under your hood, but they don't create enough to give you a fuel economy change. Unfortunately.
Okay.
But they're
Well,
out there, so watch those. Beware, because people are selling them. And right now, you can go to YouTube and watch the hundreds of people out there that have these really cool perpetual motion generators. You start them up and they'll run forever, and they show you how to design this whole thing, and they absolutely don't work. A few of them, you start them up and they'll spin for an hour, but eventually they stop. They look really cool. Like you use the motor to run the generator, which one's the motor to run the generator, and then you take a little bit of that current off and you use that to power whatever you're powering. No, it doesn't work. But they look
If
really
anybody
neat.
ever perfects that,
Yeah, you need something. There are a few things that have a bigger output than an input, like a heat pumps. Where you've got something that's 400% efficient. Well, great if you could harness the energy off of that. I've been trying to figure that out for a long time. I was telling Chris, I think I can figure this out, but I haven't been able to figure it out. That's right now. There's just no way to do it. We need a car that's a heat pump.
Mm-hmm.
We need to put a gallon in and get 4 gallons out. That's what we need.
Doug, thanks very much for the call. 866-594-4150. Let's talk to Mike. You're on the Under the Hood Show. Mike, what can we do for you?
Oh, thank you for your time. Love your show.
Thanks.
I just purchased a Nissan Rogue. It's a 4-cylinder, but I've been told that when I want to purchase another Nissan Rogue next year, the engine's going to be only a 3-cylinder. Do you have any opinions of between the durability of a 4-cylinder versus a 3-cylinder engine?
Not really. In a lighter vehicle, they work pretty good. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8. They're depending on the size of vehicle you're trying to move. I think you'll be fine. They've got turbo 4-cylinders by the gross now. They're just doing that like crazy for MPG. The turbo 3-cylinders, those would also be a pretty good choice too. I think in a small car like that, I definitely wouldn't want it. Right now, they're doing 4-cylinder engines in Silverado trucks, and I'm not a real big fan of those yet. We'll give it another 4 or 5 years and see how they hold up and how strong they are, but maybe they'll be okay. But I wouldn't want to see ever a turbo 3-cylinder in a Silverado. I just don't think it'd be the thing, but maybe in a smaller truck, it's possible. But I think Nissan usually does some pretty good research into their engines before they release anything to the market.
Is a big ever?
Yeah, a Silverado, unless your Silverado looks like the size of an old S10, which it could someday. Yeah, they might.
I'd agree
downgrade
with
them.
that. I mean, because I think with a challenge of if you are the particular buyer for a particular use and you know particularly how that vehicle is supposed to be used, it probably works fine. But that vehicle never ends up in the hands of the particular buyer for the particular use.
The Silverado will be fully electric before they go to a 3-cylinder.
Exactly.
Engine.
This is a bridge gap.
They went to a 4-cylinder.
That's what I'm saying. If someone would have called with this question 15 years ago or 20 years ago about a 4-cylinder, you'd say, nah, that'll never happen.
And now the switch is on to a different source.
So I'm just throwing that out there.
With a 3-cylinder motor, and they start doing things to get more power out of it with the turbochargers or whatever it might happen to be. It's like anything else. You start getting more components involved in the operation. It has a higher tendency to have related failures, just because of the nature of the design. But I'm guessing that they're going to set that performance up in conjunction with how they set up the transmission and how they engineer the gear ratio to give it a good driving experience. And that's going to be, to me, the tail of the tape's going to be when I get in it and drive it, how does it feel? And then what warranty are they willing to put on this to back behind what they've designed if it's an all-new thing coming out? I've heard a little bit about this, but I haven't done a lot of research on it.
And if you are concerned about that, if that is something you're going to notice, it might be something you'd be less likely to want to try too, right?
Yeah, and my mind has got to get out of what I remember of the 3-cylinder motors from the little Geo Metros and different things. I've got to get beyond that.
Thing was a beast. I had one of those. It was great.
Weren't they like 98 horsepower or something like that?
Yeah. I think it was,
somewhere in there?
110 maybe?
Yeah, it wasn't very much.
No. Mike, thanks very much for the call. But to say ever, I don't know, man. That's a big word there.
We're getting to those points where we can say a few of those things on a few cars.
Because I might just disappear. It'll be no cylinders. It'll be something altogether
different.
different.
They've already got the electric Silverado out, so I don't believe. I think General Motors has announced that they will not build another gas for certain vehicles for quite a few of them. They're done. This is the last gas. With Cadillac did that. They said this is our last gas
phasing
platform.
that out. Not to say they couldn't come back sometime, but at this point, there's a trail they're going down.
Welcome to the Under the Hood Show from the Autotempest.com studios. All the cars, one search. This is the Under the Hood Show. Russ Evans is here to answer your automotive questions.
Thanks for joining us under the hood.
Shannon Nordstrom is here to do the same.
Welcome, hoodies. Thanks for tuning in so we can help you tune up.
I'm Chris Carter here to answer your calls at 866-594-4150. We've had Bob on hold for quite a while, waiting to get the show going. So let's talk to Bob in Georgia. You're on the Under the Hood Show. Bob, what can we do for you?
Good morning. With an 07 Toyota Sequoia V8, I have a P1444 code, which I believe is a secondary air injection switching valve, stuck open.
Yes.
How can I diagnose that car? With
Well,
my son.
you need a scan tool to turn the valves on and off to test them to see if they're working. But this is a very common problem on those two valves that are up there on the cylinder heads, one on each side. You might just take one off and look in it, and if it's all full of corrosion and water, the valve is just shot. They stick once they start going, and most of the time we're replacing them in pairs. Almost always they come in, and it seems like both the codes for both banks are on at the same time, left and right. So it's very possible you've got one failing after the other. But if you can do it yourself and pick up parts for that Sequoia from an auto parts store, you're going to save yourself a ton of money. Our partner Dorman Products makes valves for those. It'll save you a ton. A shop charge for those, they're super. I mean, just the whole thing, diagnosing it, getting the parts, the whole bit, it's very expensive.
Right. Okay, doke. I will answer it. Where are these valves located?
There's one on each side of the cylinder head. You'll see a big. They're about the size of maybe the size of a apple, and there's one on each side. They're silver. They've got a little round cap on the end of them, and you'll see a tube coming off of one on each side of the cylinder head on the front.
I don't like that. Apples. I don't like.
It's like kind of like a spaceship looking thing, but they're about the size of a round of an apple. They're about the whole. If you were to take it off and put it on the desk when you took it off, that's about the size it's going to be.
Like the front of a
Rubik's Cube.
Front of a respirator mask, a industrial one.
Yeah, it's got one of those little round deals sticking off of there.
Yeah, kind of, right?
Yep, and it's about about the size of a Rubik's Cube. Is that better, Chris?
Yeah, because an apple could be different sizes.
The original Rubik's Cube, Russ?
The original.
Not one of those tiny keychain ones?
Not the small ones.
The pyramid ones?
Or
we
the
had
jumbo one.
Jumbo one. I saw a lady in Arizona just last weekend. She had one as a purse. It was fun.
Huh.
My wife noticed it right away. She had a Rubik's Cube purse that was about 10 inches by 10 inches. It was fun.
Bob, thanks very much for the call. Good luck with all that info. 866-594-4150. Let's talk to Marvin. You're on the End of the Hood Show. Marvin, what can we do for you?
Yes, I have this 98 Chevrolet one-ton pickup, and it seems to it have a Vortec engine in it, and it's got 265,000 miles on it. But in the mornings when it's cold out, or even when I go out to start it for the first time in the morning, I can hit the key and it's running. But I go down the road with it, drive it for a couple hours, and park it. If it sits there for an hour and it's warm, I get in there. It will not fire for, I got to turn it over probably 15, 20 seconds before it'll fire. And I'm wondering what the cause is.
And you say,
go
ahead.
If it's when I start it and I drive it for a ways and shut it off, and then turn the switch on again, it'll start up right then. But if I let it set for an hour, it will not fire for 15 or 20 seconds.
Curiosity, is it the Vortec 350 or the Vortec 454?
454.
7.4 liter.
Yes.
It's got a fuel pressure regulator outside on that, and they're very common to fail with age and miles, and this one's plenty old now. So I would look, that regulator's on the driver's side towards the rear of the engine. I would pull that vacuum line off of it and see if it's full of fuel when you're stopped like that. It's probably got some fuel in it, and it's causing it to flood when you go to crank it. I bet you've got an injector that's stuck, because we put lots of injectors in those engines. But if you hold it to the floor and try to crank it, when you know for sure it's not going to be one of those, it's one of those times where you've driven it, it's sat for 15 minutes and it's not going to start, hold it to the floor, try to crank it. If it fires right up in a couple seconds and then you let off the throttle and it goes, it's definitely dropping fuel in there, and it's either from a bad injector or from a regulator. But either one's going to cause your fuel mileage to go down. Not that you'd really notice when you're getting 6 normal and now you're getting 5, but it's important to save all that fuel right now.
Now, I think you just solved it.
How's that, Chris?
Well, if you hold your foot to the floor, it starts up. To me, that's a fix, and I can go on with my day. But that's,
you could. That'll get
Okay.
you where you're going. But with what it's going to cost you and the lack of the loss of your fuel economy, you
Okay.
probably make up the actual cost. And
Because that motor's thirsty enough. You don't want to
boy.
dump extra fuel in it.
Good point.
It's taken
Yeah.
enough already. That thing's going to be 5 to 10 miles per gallon.
yeah, so it's costing you $1 a mile to drive it,
Yeah.
just
yeah.
in fuel.
Say that out
Yeah,
loud.
you're right.
Yeah, not insurance or
Right.
anything else, but yeah, or brakes or whatever you got. But yeah, $1 a mile. So you want to be able to get a little more.
Good
so,
point.
Well, think about it. If you save 5%, you're lowering that cost. So let's have it cost 80 cents per mile.
What kind of mileage do you get in it, Marvin? You know?
Well, when I done a lot of heavy pulling, I'll get about 7 or 8. When I was farming yet, I'd done a lot of heavy pulling with it, but now it's just loafing around with it, so 12 or 13.
That's
Not
pretty
bad.
good. No
Yeah,
more.
Not bad for one of them. And so how long of a trip do you take it on usually?
Oh, right now it's just short jogs out to the farm and back to town where I live, but years ago when I was farming, I'd go 3-4 hours pulling a livestock trailer, long hauls.
Yeah. Well, there's a good place to look, and hopefully that'll solve your problem.
Marvin, thanks very much for the call. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we want to hear from you. The phone number to reach us, 866-594-4150. You're listening to the Under the Hood Show. 866-594-4150. From the Autotempest.com studios, all the cars, one search. This is the Under the Hood Show. Got a question that came in from Facebook from Levi. I have an 06 GMC Sierra Denali with a 6.0. Everything has been fine until last week. I noticed a noise after starting. Initially thought it was an idler pulley. Drove about 15 miles, went to shut it off, and the starter was still cranking after the engine died. Cranked for 5 to 10 seconds and shut off. It does this almost all the time. If I bump the key about the third or fourth time, it'll start and disengage and runs fine. Where do I start to get this diagnosed? Don't know if it's the starter, ECM, or ignition.
What year was it again?
06.
06.
Got a starter relay under the hood, too. That's the first place we'd start, is just put a starter relay in it. Swap it with another. You've got other ones next to it. You can pull the horn relay out, put it in the starter relay.
First thing I would do
shot.
is something that I ran across just by accident in a parking lot one day because somebody was having the same problem with the same truck, is just get down by the starter and check the exciter wire. There's a part of that is exposed to the rigors of the world as it runs down the road, and eventually that wire just gets beat up, and it can sit there and it'll
touch the other one.
Yep. And so check those wires going to the starter.
I completely forgot about that one.
Because that would be, to me, a likely culprit if it's intermittent at this point. Because we could get underneath there and we could wiggle the wires, and it would start. And then eventually, I wiggled them too much and it broke.
Mm-hmm.
And so then we had to figure out how to mend the wire as best we could to get the person home, and then they could do their repair when they got home. That happened in the parking lot out here at work a couple of years ago.
When mine did that, I just held it on through the fender and told my wife to crank it up.
So that would be a place to. He asked where to start.
Mm-hmm.
Start by looking at the wires down by the starter and making sure that they're all solid, good, not corroded and green at the connector, because earth gets after them right there.
And then the relay, and then
Mm-hmm.
next.
Yep.
866-594-4150. Let's go to Washington and talk to Willie. You're on the End of the Hood Show. Willie, what can we do for you?
Hi, guys. Talked to you before about my 2014 Jeep Patriot. I believe a four-cylinder. Anyway, the problem is I went to plug in my cell phone in the outlet, the 110 outlet under the armrest. Wasn't working. What controls that? Is that a fuse or that other thing with a circuit breaker? Do you have any knowledge of that?
You have used it before, right?
When it was new, yes.
Okay. Because there is a button to turn that on and off on the dash. You've got to have it turned on to use it. But if that is there and you've got it turned on, then it does have a fuse that powers just that unit. It has a, we'll call it a module. There's an inverter built in there that converts your battery voltage, steps it up, and changes the amperage to AC current. And that unit they fail now and then. People have to replace that unit. Any car that has an outlet like that built into it has one of those little units, and the units they're not that expensive because they're not that hot a seller. They just don't sell many of them, and it's not like it's not one that would be good for a camper or something for big amps. So it's not like people are going to all the salvage yards around the country trying to buy them up so they can power a refrigerator.
Yeah,
or
you
something.
get a few trends like that, but not very many.
Yeah, this one's pretty small. I mean, it's a very small wattage available there, so it may have failed. I would first check the fuses. If the fuses are good, then you have to go to the unit and make sure there's battery voltage at the unit. If you got battery voltage coming in and nothing coming out, that unit's gone. It's just time for a new one. Just decide to fail.
Now, the switch you're talking about, what does the switch look like? Is there a outlet or something on the switch?
Yes. Usually there'll be a little picture of an outlet on the front of it, and it'll say something like
12 volt. 12V sometimes, or
well, no, this is 110 volts. So it'll say 110.
110.
On it.
Yeah, thanks.
And it'll have
Russ.
a picture of a socket face on it, little smiley face, or it'll say shore power on some vehicles. I don't know why they do that because it's not shore power. Or outlet. It may be labeled as outlet. I don't remember what that Jeep has. I've seen some of the vans, the Chrysler vans, and they just have the picture of the outlet on it, and it says 110, and you push it, and it turns it on. Some of them will only allow it to run while the engine is running. You've got to have the engine running in order for the alternator to be running to provide enough power for it and to be able to push the button to turn the switch on.
If you have the owner's manual, there'll be something about that in the owner's manual.
Yeah, for sure.
For sure. If you haven't taken a chance to look in there, it might be worth a look.
I got it right in front of me here. I just wondering what they call that.
Receptacle. Receptacle or outlet is usually what they call it.
Accessory outlet could be under accessory, something like that.
One other question, really quick, while I got you guys. I took the tank, when I gassed up, I filled it to the tippy top. Okay, the gas clean, and now it's bucking. Okay, so I saw the error of my ways. And how long will that take for that thing to purge out of there, where it doesn't do that anymore?
Well, you bring up a good point for the rest of our hoodies listening right now, because we've talked about this, and probably not as many people trying to put every dollar unless they know it's on sale right now.
Right.
But you don't ever want to overfill the tank, because eventually you'll overflow that raw fuel into the emissions area.
And it's happened on this one now. That's why it's doing that.
And so a lot of it will sometimes dry out or work its way out of the system, but sometimes when they get too saturated with that raw fuel, they don't. And then that's when you get into problems with evaporative emission codes and having problems filling the vehicle, because it'll kick back because you've saturated that system. A lot of times it's a charcoal canister. There's a series of valves involved in that. But
how long has it been doing it?
Oh, probably about a year. But no, it hasn't thrown a code though. No code or anything like that. It'll buck. And then like I said, I stopped it, and it's down to maybe it might do it once a day, and it's like a stumbling,
That's a different. That's a different issue. Your fuel issue's gone away. I think it was a coincidence that it happened at the same time. It's probably got an ignition misfire or something going on in the transmission. From what we've seen with those vehicles, I would want to. If it was in our shop, I would drive it. If I could get it to act up, I would know right away what that feeling was, and then I would look at the scanner and look at misfire data and see if it's got one that's just random now and then. 14 original coils on it. It's possible they're starting to break down a little bit and causing a little bit of stumble with the misfire. But the fuel should be long gone by now.
And that wouldn't throw a code if it's just a random once in a while.
If it's very slight,
light,
no.
yeah.
But it's got to be pretty steady to throw that.
Willie, thanks very much for the call. Good luck. 866-594-4150. Here's another question that came in online from Phil. Hey, guys, I'm going to be doing my very first brake job on my 13-year-old SUV. I'm anticipating a challenge removing the bolts for the caliper mounting bracket. As you know, these are high-torque bolts, and I will have very limited working space, especially for the rear brakes where I cannot turn the wheel for better access. Some options are banging a wrench with a hammer, using a jack to raise the wrench, or using a cordless power impact wrench. What is the best way to remove these high torque bolts without risking snapping off the heads?
Well, if the head snaps off, you've got to replace the bracket back there. If you got an independent suspension vehicle, you can replace the knuckle back there. If you don't, you're in serious trouble. But I haven't had any issue with the ones that have a complete rear end back there with them coming out. You can use some heat on them if you need to, a little propane torch to get them hot so you can get them off there. But typically we don't use the impact wrench because the hammering of that can break the head of the bolts or strip them out. So we usually just use a long breaker bar with the correct socket, 6-point socket, so it grabs all sides of the
That's
bolt.
the big deal, having a good socket on there, a 6-point socket.
Yep. And then we just pull, and you'll hear a snap, and it'll come loose, and we take them off. Most vehicles we can get off of there. It's the ones that have the big Torx bit that are on the front of a lot of these vehicles. Those can be tricky, and some of those take a 4 or 5 foot breaker bar or an extension handle to get them loose. Yeesh. And we use only the heaviest Snap-on, Matco, those type of sockets because they do break, and we will break, 1 out of 5 jobs. We'll snap the head off of one of our sockets because they're in there so tight. And occasionally we'll have to heat one up if it's one with Loctite. But I think you might be able to get to it with
some
just
of
a breaker
those
bar.
are exposed on the backside. It's not a dead hole. And it's a good idea to...
That's lucky if you've got that.
If you do. If it's exposed in the backside, then get your PB blaster out and penetrating oil to death and let it just soak.
A couple days.
A couple days before you do it.
Not working on it right away. Yeah, a couple days.
It's hard to get that much intrusion if you don't have an open hole on the backside when a bolt's that tight on those tight of surfaces. But if it is an open hole on the backside, I would definitely get it with some PB blaster before I started the operation a few days.
In the worst case, if you do break it off, you can take, once you get all the caliper bracket off and the rotor off, you can take a drill and drill right through the center of it, and then a little bigger one, go through the center of it, and then use a tap to clean up the threads once you get everything out, or an ease out once you get to that point. And then our partner at Dorman Products does sell a large range of new caliper bolts for those brackets. So you can replace those. They also sell the bolts that hold the hubs on because people break those off all the time or round the heads off. If you got one with a rounded head and you're doing a wheel bearing, it might be tempting to say, well, I took 3 or 4 bolts out. I got the hub off. They're only a little stripped. I'll put the new bearing on and put the bolts back in. But then what's going to happen is the next person, which is probably going to be you because of Murphy's Law, you're not going to be able to get them off the next time. So always replace those. They're cheap. They're like $10-15 or something like that, I think. So
Have you guys ever, I don't know if you guys have ever tried this, but sometimes I don't want to go get the socket, so I just use a pliers and I just squeeze real hard. Does that ever, or you round off the bolt?
We're not in pliers territory at all on this one.
Vice grips?
Not
No?
on this one at all.
Okay.
No. This is maybe a smaller fastener, not this one, Chris.
We're going to talk to Tim in Kansas when we get back. We got to take a quick break. 866-594-4150. You're listening to the Under the Hood Show.
Get your planner out right now and schedule your next radio appointment with the Motor Medics.
866-594-4150 from the Autotempest.com studios. All the cars, one search. You're listening to the Under the Hood Show. If you subscribe to our YouTube channel and join the Hoodie fan club at underthehoodshow.com, you could win a hoodie.
like Daryl W. Scarpin, who listens to us in Bend, Oregon. Congratulations for all us here and our friends over at Universal Technical Institute. Universal Technical Institute, the place to go when you need to know how to work on your car. They'll get you trained. Campuses all over the country.
Go for it. Start a new career.
Do it.
Just do it. Doesn't matter.
It's not just cars either. They got boats, motorcycles, welding. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff. Check it out today.
And their campuses are in warm places. You can go somewhere warm and leave. You know, when we, up here where we are, it gets cold and windy, South Dakota. And then we have one of those nice days. Just right in the middle of March, you have one of those beautiful days, and you go, you know what?
I'll stay another year.
Why don't I live somewhere where I can just do this every day? People say, oh, these are the days why you can put up with the cold. But there are places where you can just have those days all winter. I don't get it. I got to get out of here. Let's talk to Tim in Kansas. Kansas. I'm going to pass on. Tim, you're on the Under the Hood show. What can we do for you?
Hey, thanks much, and I can understand your theory of the weather being nice one day and bad the next day. So
Yeah, for sure.
we have that a lot here. Hey, I've got a 2013 F-150 EcoBoost V6, and got a little over 100,000 miles on it. I bought it with 91, I believe. When the heater is on, I get a bypass smoky smell coming through the vents. And I can't really find much online. You know how Google is, and I wouldn't always say to follow Google because they told me to torque my lug nuts on my Ford Edge to 160 foot-pounds, and I told my son that wasn't correct, but I showed him how it didn't work.
Oh.
Yeah. What's the bypass coming from, or what's that smell coming from? And then I have a cold start issue, and then also a little fuel thing that I got a question. So you tell me if I need to tell you all the questions, ask you all the questions, and then how you do that.
I'm a little more curious about the smoky smell, like fire smoky smell, or
no, it's kind of like burnt oil, like a bypass coming from a seal that isn't sealing quite right. And it only occurs when the heater's on. Now, after it's just been running for a few minutes and I stop, I can see some of the steamy smoke coming out from underneath there, but then after a while it quits.
from underneath the
right
hood? From underneath the hood, are you talking about, or from underneath the dash?
Yes, underneath the hood.
Okay.
Underneath the hood, yeah. The smell is inside, and the steam is on the outside.
It'll pull that smell inside from under the hood because that's where your venting is up by the cowl. So if you've got your heater on, you're smelling it. It's originating from under the hood, and it's as simple as you eliminate the under the hood problem, you're going to have the inside fixed. Now we got to find out
what are some
where
common
it's at.
oil leaks you see on those EcoBoosts for us?
The turbocharger, the lines on the turbochargers, those leak. There's little O-rings on there, and those oil feed tubes leak a lot on those. We've ended up replacing a lot of them. So
you could get a small oil leak, and then the heat of that turbo as it spools up.
it's running around the exhaust.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's burning right in the
That's
exhaust.
going to give you a
You're gonna
smell
get
pretty quick that way then.
for sure, the burnt smell. So I would
Yeah.
take a quick look at those. They're on each side, just through the fender well, on each side down where the pipe connects on the side of the engine.
Does that become an expensive thing to replace?
Well, it becomes a fire hazard, and that gets really expensive. That we've seen a few of them.
Well, that wasn't his question, but it sure
Right.
proves the point.
Well, we've seen some burned up. We've got them in. I mean, you've had some fires.
yeah.
So you want to replace it, but I want to say that parts and labor and everything on there, I'm just guessing. I think the last one of those that we had to replace both sides, I think it was like $800, like $400 a side for parts and labor to get in there. Now, there's another one that's coolant that requires pulling the turbo, and it's a little more per side.
So the things you always look at, though, then outside of the abnormal thing people don't think of would be those lines. But of course,
valve covers
valve cover
leak on
gaskets.
those too. And those are cheaper than that.
And if you had a valve cover that had a PCV line that had worked its way loose or was getting congested and it was leaking back, I mean, you just got to really take a good look under the hood to see anywhere that's got some of that oil look. And it doesn't take much of a drip of oil on a hot surface to emit that odor that it's picking up through your fresh air vent.
The steam was coming from down below on the left side back for the back side.
Yeah, that's
where.
Yeah, if it's steam, it could be the coolant tubes down there. If it's oil, it could be the oil tubes. But I would definitely get in there with a good, strong flashlight and scope it out.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that one. On when I start it up after it's been sitting overnight, I get a little bit of a humming sound after I drive down the road and come to a stop. There's still nice sound effects there anyhow, but it just makes a little noise. It doesn't sound like a bearing to me. I'm a farm kid, and usually you're going to have more of a constant, especially when you're turning and things of that nature, being a wheel bearing. So I decided to play a little bit and do my put my all-wheel drive in gear and see if I have much of a noise then. It doesn't seem to occur as much. Now the question is, is that just me, my psychological brain not working properly, or is it possible that I don't use my four-wheel drive much at all? Does it need to be engaged once in a while just to kind of keep it lubed in shape, working, whatever?
Yes, you do need to run it, turn it on and off now and then, at least once a month, if not every couple weeks. Just turn it on and turn it back off just to make sure it doesn't stay in the off position. But you could have a wheel bearing or something going out, or a drive shaft joint or something.
Does that have those
turn it on.
vacuum actuated hubs on it in 13?
Yep.
And that could be something that's just not quite retracting all the way.
Right, and if they don't, then they'll drag and grind until you hit the on button, and then the vacuum is taken away and they engage.
A little bit of a different sound than the bearing sound.
Kind of a grinding. So if it's not pulling, it out and releasing it, yeah, it could be the.
And there again, some common use of that does help keep that pliable and keep it moving. That's something we see on some of those. So we're not telling you that's what it is, but it's definitely something you may not be thinking about. You can check in on.
Is that is it wrong to run the all-wheel drive for a day or two as I'm driving, or not?
Well,
That's not auto; it's a full-time. So.
Yeah, it's a full-time four-wheel drive. You don't want to do that.
There's an all-wheel drive, and then there's an all-wheel drive high speed or something like that.
Does it say all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive?
You might have an auto setting.
Does it have auto?
I think it's auto.
Yeah, if it's got the
an auto setting.
Yeah, the auto 4x4, you can turn that on and run it as long as you want. That's just an automatic, turns on and off by itself. And that'll engage those hubs all the time. They stay engaged. It just disengages the transfer case. If you've ever got one though that says it's a part-time where it's just four-wheel drive or two-wheel drive, you don't want to run it in four-wheel drive. It'll bind up. But that one, yeah, you could leave it in the auto position. The hubs are going to lock in, and your noise is probably going to go away if it's like Shannon was talking about those front hubs, vacuum hubs.
But having that auto position is good, and what that's designed for is when you're in a situation where your roads are temporarily slippery, not slippery, you don't want to be running in that four-wheel drive all the time. That's a good setting for that, but it's still going to put extra drag at time to time on things that you don't need. But to run it on that way for a day or two just to let the system be engaged, it's designed to slip internally and not bind up compared to the 4-high setting, for the highway type four-wheel drive. Does that compare?
Okay.
Does that sound correct to you?
Sounds good to me. I mean, it makes sense to me actually, because sometimes if you don't activate something often enough, it will bind up and get kind of.
Yeah, the 4-high setting that most vehicles have, or four-wheel drive, all the time setting, it's designed to be used on a slippery surface. It's designed when you're pretty much all snow covered, or you're out in the dirt, or loose dirt, or you're all in loose sand or whatever. That's what that's designed for. But once you start getting where you're on a solid surface, an asphalt surface, a concrete surface, that 4-high starts to bind up on the differentials, and that's when you start getting the drivetrain lash and different things really engaged. And no reason to do that. You're just putting extra stress on things you don't need to.
Sure. Awesome. All right. One more if I have time here.
Sure.
When after I run it for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, and I stop and say eat lunch with a friend, come back out to my truck. This generally happens in the warmer climates. If it sets for about an hour and I come out to turn it on to start it, it takes a long time before it fires. It's kind of like a carburetor. It's not getting its fuel, and finally it just slowly then goes. To me, there's something with the fuel system, and then also when I'm just starting out and I want to push it just a little bit, it stutters just a little bit and then jumps forward, like making up for that little lost time.
It may be the fuel pump failing on it. We've replaced a number of them on the EcoBoost trucks like that in the F-150s.
But before you made an assumption and you had it at the shop, what are you going to do, Russ? This one needs to be checked, I think.
Check the fuel pressure and check the voltage to that pump, because they have that fuel pump module, which fails a lot on those too. They corrode through on the backside, and they can act all sorts of weird ways.
Yeah, so you're going to inspect that, and then you're going to, if it'll duplicate this often, you want to hook the scanner to that and take it out and see what the fuel terms are doing. If you've checked all that fuel pressure stuff and everything looks like it's legit, because we just hate to have somebody go out and just throw a pump in or throw a module in. You can test a lot of this. And you have no check engine lights on?
No.
Yeah.
Everything's good.
So it could very well be in that base fuel system, but you definitely want to check things out
Can you
first.
push the gas all the way to the floor and try to start it and find out a diagnosis?
Probably not
from
on
that?
this one. I
Okay.
think it's going to be a pressure issue if it starts checking it, either electrical or pressure issue because of failed pump.
Tim, thanks very much for the call. Good luck. 866-594-4150. Let's go to Colorado and talk to Dan. You're on the Under the Hood Show. Dan, what can we do for you?
Yeah, hey, thanks for taking my call, guys. Hey, I got a 2011 Nissan Frontier. It's the SL model, four-wheel drive, got the V6 4.0 in it. My transmission, automatic, 5-speed. The fluid in that, I'm not real familiar with automatics. This is only the second automatic I've ever owned. But the fluid in this, and I've tried on the dipstick, cloth and everything to see any color at all, but it's clear. The transmission fluid on this is, to me, it's clear. I mean, it's not dirt, doesn't look dirty or anything, but it's a clear fluid.
Does not have a red color to it whatsoever?
I can't see any.
There are some factory fluids that are clear colored. They're hydraulic fluids, so like power steering fluids. Some of them are clear, some of them are red, some of them are tan. That is the possibility that's going on. The other thing that will cause clear fluid is if you've got a transmission so hot that it's burnt the coloring out of it, that can happen. We get them, they go from black to clear because when they're that burnt. We used to have some Tauruses that would come into the shop like that. And we're like, yeah, this thing's been super hot, but
that's not going to be it.
No, this one here is probably
Because it's operating well, correct?
Yes, it's operating real well. I just bought the truck in December, and that's why my concern was with it.
Yeah. Maybe, color blindness just to the color red only. Can you see red cars, or are they invisible when you drive down the road? It's like, look, the invisible jet.
I seriously, though, would check with your mechanic to see what the factory fill is on that and see what's recommended as a comparable to the factory fill and see if one of those options is more of like a...
Nissan has a lot of fluids that are different colors.
Yeah, so I would like to check into that a little bit to see what that factory fill is, just to make sure somebody didn't put the wrong thing in there.
I just Googled it quick, and the results are all, you might have a surprise when you find it. And there's a bunch of websites that's the title of.
Okay, because that would be our hunch, but
Clear
I hate to ever say definite on something like that for somebody, because we do want to get into the resources to check and get it right with the right service grade fluid, right viscosity, the things you're supposed to use to make that thing operate correctly. Because that's an expensive little transmission in there if you don't get it right.
Right,
for sure.
Exactly.
And I gotta go back to
that's what I
something.
found.
I gotta go back to something you said at the beginning of the call because it intrigued me.
What's that?
You sound like you're over 50 years old.
Yes,
And I could guess that maybe you're over 60 years old.
I am.
And I'll stop there.
You can guess his weight and give him
And this is only the second automatic transmission vehicle you have.
I noticed that too.
I want to hear more.
It
What
is.
did you have before? Let's talk about this a little bit.
Well, I bought brand new 2004 Dodge Ram 2500 diesel in 2004, and I've had it. Just like I said, I just traded it in, basically straight across for the one I've got now.
So even going back, you bought straight stick cars. You just stayed, because automatics obviously been around for a long time.
Yep, I've had the only other vehicle I had that was an automatic was a 82 Dodge Ram Power Wagon, half-ton, four-wheel drive. That's the only other automatic I've ever owned.
And that probably had a 727 trans in it that was about as strong as a manual
had
trans.
Yeah, it had a 460 motor in it. So anyway, yeah, that's I've always been a stick man, I guess you could say.
Well, that's cool. Just a lot of people have. There's very few that would call our show and be able to say that.
Dan, thanks very much for the call. Good luck. 866-594-4150. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we want to hear from you on the Under the Hood Show.
Prepare to learn something. You're going under the hood.
866-594-4150 from the Autotempest.com studios. All the cars, one search. This is the Under the Hood Show. Now let's talk to Monica in Minnesota. Monica, you're on the Under the Hood Show. What can we do for you?
Well, here's the scoop. I called several times about my 2007 Suburban.
It had a growly noise, didn't it?
Yes. And guess what? Because of your show and because of you guys giving me the encouragement, I got it fixed.
All right.
That's awesome. I got to know, because I remember you calling in and you were describing the noise, and we were having an interesting time with your description and what it was. So what'd you end up having to do?
Well, here's the scoop. I needed 2 head gaskets, 2 valve cover gaskets, 20 head bolts, 10 head bolts, 8 lifters, ASM lifters, intake gasket kit, and then 2 more exhaust manifold gaskets.
We know exactly.
12 bolt exhaust manifold and 2 exhaust seals.
We know exactly what they did.
Keep going. Let's hear the end of it. You went this far. We got to hear the end of it.
Okay, 3 rockers and 3 push rods. And this is what's going to be, this is what makes my husband and my day, is the leaking that was in the garage. He didn't know about this, he put it on, figured it all out, kind of what he was going to do, ordered the parts, and then he said, hey, you want to replace your coils from your transmission? They're leaking. So we got new what are they called?
Cooling lines, transmission cooling lines.
Yeah, cooler
Yes,
lines.
thank you. Yep.
So did you spend about $4,000 to $5,000?
No. That's what is even better. Remember what you told me? Try to find some friend that knew somebody or something.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's what I did. And I want to tell you, I'm not going to say the school's name, but this is going to be something really wonderful that's encouraging on this show. The young man and his father did it together. And they're gifted mechanics. Yep.
That
and
is,
they don't do that for a living, though.
well, that is
Do other
great.
things.
So you had a failure in the AFM system like we were thinking, where your lifters were making that noise. So they had to pull the heads off, clean them up, put new gaskets on it. They replaced the lifters and found some bent push rods and rocker issues. So they put all that back together, which is the right way. It sounds like they got, the bolts they had. There's 2 different sizes there. That's why there's one set number of one and one number of the other. Then the exhaust bolts, it's good to replace that hardware and those gaskets. So it sounds like they've got all the parts to do that job right. And if it's running well for you now, that's awesome that you're able to get it fixed for a reasonable price and back on the road.
Very, very good, because normally what you described, that is a $4,000 to $5,000 repair.
It's expensive.
Give or take. It's a lot of hours involved. So I am so happy that you were able to get that done, and that you also found your leaks so you can have a dry garage floor. And no more moments of wonder, and you got some great people it sounds like you found. I hope you tipped them well and maybe bought them some fresh home-baked cooking or something.
Yeah, I tell you what, I asked them, I said that. I said, why are you taking this on? Is it because you're just being sweethearts? And they said, well, not always can they take a job on. I've been waiting since last June, but I didn't care. My husband has known the dad for 40 years. So, we just said, we'll wait, and so he said he'd get it done in February, and March 2nd, it was done.
Awesome.
Sounds perfect, Monica.
You
Thanks.
bet. Well, hey, we got to grab another call here. Thanks for being a hoodie. I'm glad you gave us an update.
Thanks for the update. 866-594-4150. Let's talk to John. You're on the End of the Hood Show. What can we do for you?
Yeah, I got an 09 Tahoe, and it's a Z71, and something to do with my dash lights, the odometer reading, and then, of course, your indicator for what shift lever you're in. But during the day, you can't read them. But at night, if I have my lights on, they're bright as could be. And I'm wondering, is that the switch that's going bad, or is it actually my cluster?
You've turned the dimmer all the way up, right, inside?
Yes, it's all the way up where you turn on your dome lights. Next click, you know.
Perfect, because some of those, when the daytime running lights go on and during the day there's shade or something on the dash, they'll click on, and people found they've been low. But when you say they're bright at night, they're bright enough you have to turn them down because they're all the way up bright?
I could, but no, they're just where you're able to read them.
The most common thing on that indicator.
I mean, they're bright enough.
The most common thing on that indicator to not be able to be seen is an actual circuit problem on the circuit board that's in the cluster where the indicator is at. There's some hacks online where people will go in and take that apart and fix some solder joints and make it work. And it may just be that in the daytime there's no illumination there that it's supposed to be. And then at night, when you have the ambient illumination from the backside of the cluster on the rest of it, it might be showing through and letting you see that mileage and that indicator. But if you can't see that during the day with the dimmer all the way up, I've got many friends that have called me about this one, and it's typically a problem in that instrument cluster itself. And so you can, like I said, if you're very adventurous, you can take the cluster out, check the connections, do all that. But then the next step is you take it apart and you find the solder joint and you heat it up and resolder it, and you can sometimes fix it yourself. If not, you can send that cluster on an exchange basis to a repair. You can get another one sent in. Our partners at Dorman Products, they have that available through a lot of different channels. But that is a common replacement item for the people that aren't going to try to do that.
Or you could ignore it, right?
Yeah, and just be willing to know that you got to be in the right situation and you know what gear you're in. But that is, from what I know, that's the most common thing.
John, thanks very much for the call. Good luck. That'll do it for this hour of the Under the Hood Show. The Under the Hood Show is brought to you by Sturdivants. Until next time, you can find us at underthehoodshow.com. For Russ Evans, Shannon Nordstrom, I'm Chris Carter. Thanks for listening to the Under the Hood Show. All right, this is the after show now. This is unofficial. Is it unofficial? I guess it still counts, right?
No, it's
I mean,
official. It's a real show.
Yeah, it's not.
Podcast, YouTube, it's out there.
Now is when we tell you, this is where we break the news about how we've got the 100 mile to the gallon
car.
We have a thing you can buy.
The secret show.
Yeah. Russ has the Studebaker.
This is the
That's where it's at.
Secret
He
show.
has it.
Let's go to Wyoming and talk to Sean. You're on the Under the Hood Show. Sean, what can we do for you?
Hey, well, I have a weird situation, but I'm just trying to get a question answered. Something very weird happened to me yesterday. So I had a wheel seal go out on my 93 Chevy A1500, and so I take it into the shop, and they get it up on the lift. They take the cover off, and they bring me over to go take it out. And they pointed out that the bolt that holds the pin in for the rear diff was welded around it, so that way you can't take the bolt out. And then the ring gears were welded on, and half the bolts were missing. And they can understand why it was done that way, and I'm still trying to figure that out. Do you have any idea why someone would do that?
Yeah, there was probably a noise or something back there, so they welded the spider gears to lock that rear end, or they just tried to weld that pin that wouldn't stay in there, because we've had some of them come loose. They got stripped. Let's say they pulled one out to put an axle seal in it, and they put the pin back in, and they over-tightened it, and they stripped the housing, so they just said, well, it won't stay. Let's just weld it up. That can happen.
It was done in repair to total disrespect to the next repair.
Right. Yeah, they just, but and also, on the other coin, they probably said, think about if somebody was working on it and they said, hey, your differential, the pin is stripped or had fallen out or something, we can weld it, but it's just it's not going to be fixable again, and then you buy it and you don't know. We don't know exactly why this has happened, but I'm sure that's probably what happened along the line.
Instead of replacing the carrier case and doing a rear end rebuild, somebody did, probably the budget was not there, and they just made a
Save some money.
Save some money and did a hack.
Got it done, but that means, like we talked about earlier in the show, about bolts that get stripped off. Don't put them back in. If they go in, but they don't come back out, it makes it harder for the next person working on it.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I actually immediately from there I went to my local junkyard, which luckily, I'm able to actually go in there and take all my tools. But I actually found the same exact gear ratio. I think it's the 373 TT4 marking that they put on there, and was able to actually get a whole new rear end in pretty good condition, actually, probably in better condition than the rear end that I got.
Well,
but
if it wasn't welded up,
yeah,
it was definitely in better condition.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Now I get to have the wheel seal. I'm going to get all the seals basically replaced and, go from there, try to make it as best as I possibly can. But what a weird situation that
we sell a lot of complete rear axle assemblies at our professional automotive recycling facility that we ship all over the country because things like this happen. They get into it and they find a chronic break or something that is going to cost a lot of money to fix, or the shop doesn't have the fine technique available with their technicians to set up the tensions and the backlash and stuff in the rear end. And so they figure, you know what? It's just as affordable for us to get a whole new assembly. We'll freshen up the brakes, we'll put seals in it, and we'll just bolt in a whole new assembly that isn't broken. And sometimes that labor is cheaper and that total investment is cheaper than trying to rebuild the whole center section of the rear end or put new axles in it or that sort of thing. It happens a lot.
And in their defense, too, you don't know when they made that decision, what their plan was for the vehicle and how that might have changed over time. For
Exactly. Oh, that's interesting.
Right. Yeah.
You don't want to see that when you open up a cover, though, that's for sure.
No, it was scary. It was definitely scary looking. And I'm like, so I basically can't do anything with it. I'll just keep some 80, 90 on. But I found that rear end and I tore it out within 5 hours, jacking up the vehicle that was kind of flash buried and all that stuff. So I was able to drop it down, put it in the back of my bed of my truck, took it over to them, said, hey, check it over. I took the cover off. Everything looks good. There's no chunks of metal. I was like, give it a once over, see if it's good. If not, I'll take it back and grab it.
Well, it sounds like you got your situation solved in a resourceful way. It was awesome.
Sean, thanks very much for the call. All right, there you go. Happy St. Patrick's Day.
That was quite an after show.
Yeah.
If you hung in there for the whole thing.
Yeah.
Very good.
All right. Anything else before we go? Anything you got? You, my friend, have mellowed over the years.
Why's that?
Sean went to the junkyard and you just took it right in stride.
I did, but I came back and followed up with a professional automotive recycling reference.
Absolutely,
but
you did.
What he described he had to do, because the vehicle had been, did you listen to that?
Mm-hmm.
Sunk into the mud. He had to dig it up out of the ground. 5 hours of, that's not what we do.
That's not what you guys do.
No. We dissect the vehicles for the customer, or we have a self-service facility that is well organized where people can get at things easily.
Yeah, they don't sink into the ground there either.
It's a little tacky right now on the top because we got spring.
I bet.
But the vehicles are up on stands and people can do what they need to do, and that's a whole different world than what he just described.
Definitely.
But hey, he got it done, and he was reusing. Reuse first, then recycle. That's the way we look at things.
Thanks for joining us for the Under the Hood show, and subscribe, smash that like button, ring that bell.
Ding, ding.